Well, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. We're absolutely thrilled that you're here tonight. We are absolutely honored to have two outstanding educators with us tonight to talk about trauma and neurodiverse children tools and strategies. I had an opportunity to preview this presentation, and I am absolutely in awe and can't wait to learn from these two people tonight. How this is going to play out over the next hour and a half, Heather and Kristin do have a planned educational presentation. At the end, they do have time for questions and answers. What we would ask is that you please provide those questions in the chat out the meeting. And of course, and you can unmic and ask your question as well. Know that this workshop is being recorded for use in future educational opportunities, but do know that the Q&A will not be part of the finished video to protect your confidentiality and privacy. So with that said, I'm going to actually turn it over to one of my colleagues who's going to introduce the presenters and kick off tonight's event. So Cheryl?
Yeah, well,
It's all
welcome.
yours.
Sure, welcome. I would like to introduce Kristin Kashuba. Kristin is from Marathon, where she graduated from high school and now shares her life with her husband. She obtained her bachelor's and master's degree from SUNY Cortland, and where she has also completed her certificate of advanced study to become a school administrator. Kristin also became a national board certified teacher, exceptional needs specialist, birth through 21 in 2017. She and her husband have two boys that attend school in Marathon, just as they did. Their boys keep them very busy with their athletics and activities. In her free time, she rewatches old favorites on Netflix, walks the woods with her family, listens to books and podcasts, or plays games with her family. She also enjoys yoga, weight training, and running to keep her mentally and physically fresh for whatever the day has in store. Working in public education at the elementary level, it was crucial to learn and adopt the best and most effective strategies for supporting students with trauma. Now being an administrator of an alternative high school, these tools have become second nature. She uses these healing-centered strategies to support her students and her staff. Kristin believes that applying trauma-informed care to almost any situation needs to become a universal response. Welcome, Kristin. And then I'd like to also introduce Heather Murphy. Heather Murphy grew up in Ithaca and currently lives in Kirkwood, New York. She graduated from Ithaca High School and continued her education at SUNY Geneseo and Elmira College. She has been a special education teacher for 23 years in various placements that include consultant teacher, integrated co-teaching, resource room, and special class setting. In addition to teaching, Heather has worked with various agencies in Tompkins County, giving her an outside of school perspective on needs support for individuals with disabilities. The Ithaca Youth Bureau, Racker Center, and Finger Lakes Independence Center taught her about the importance of recreational and family support services for youth with disabilities. When she is not teaching, she enjoys reading, being outside through all seasons, and spending time with family and friends. And we welcome Heather too. So I think we have a slide presentation, and I'm just going to kind of run through what our plan is for tonight. So we the title for tonight's presentation is Trauma, Neurodiverse Tools and Strategies for Kids. And so just a little, so you can kind of understand what we're hoping to accomplish tonight. And here's our outline. We did our introductions. We will go through some definitions and some triggers, talk about some new research, give some examples and experiences, strategies. We will welcome questions and provide some resources to you. So I'm just sorry. So just a definition: trauma is an emotional wound resulting from a shocking event or multiple and repeated life-threatening or extremely frightening experiences that may cause lasting negative effects in a person, disrupting healthy physical, emotional, intellectual development. And then children in adoptive, kinship, and foster homes have a history of loss and toxic stress.
All right, I think I get to jump in here a little bit. So when we talk about childhood trauma, we think about big T traumas, I think, and how those might impact our kids and how they learn and how they work with us in the world. And some of the things that you might see physically are poor concentration, shakiness. If a student is what you call triggered, or a child, I'm going to say student, sorry, just because that's my life at the moment. They could have big extreme night terrors or nightmares, lack of energy or big bursts of energy, physical illness like, oh, my tummy hurts, and then they're chronic nurse goers and there's really not an actual illness, it's more psychosomatic stuff. Sleep disturbances, sometimes they sleep too much, sometimes they don't sleep enough. It just depends on the kiddo and how their body kind of keeps the score. That's a little tag to a book called The Body Keeps the Score from an author called Bessel van der Kolk. It's a great book if you're ever looking for some trauma-informed background. Behaviorally, it can look like a lot of different things. It can include compulsion, impulse control, look very similar to students with attention deficit, eating disorders where they're eating too much or not enough, or only certain foods and very controlling about their foods. Isolation, they're going to pull themselves away from other students or push themselves into social situations. You know, in older students, you see this more, push themselves into social situations that might get them an adrenaline spike or might make them feel like they're doing something to just make them feel, they'll tell you, or numbness or callousness, or they just don't feel anything at all. And that's a scary place to be for them as well. Emotionally, it can look like really big angry outbursts, or likewise the other way, to go inward and be angry with yourself and self-harm. It can look like anxiety. It can look like the big emotional outbursts of crying. Instead of anger and breaking things, they just withdraw and ball up and cry. Depression is another thing. A lot of these symptoms can be misdiagnosed or diagnosed in addition to kids that have experienced trauma, and a lot of them are comorbid. So if it looks like you might have one, sometimes they kind of intermesh with one another, so they can overlap. Panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and this isn't the be all end all list. Basically, if you are, or your child is experiencing something and you're not sure what it is and there's not a medical diagnosis for it, chances are good it probably has something to do with something they've experienced in their life that maybe they don't even realize yet. Okay.
So these are some of the signs we see at the different age levels or grade levels within the school setting. In preschool children, we often see them have a fear of being separated from their parent or caregiver. This might be excessive clinging on. They may be really upset. They may be inconsolable. We see what we call defiance, but it's really their way of protecting themselves. They seem like they're just not going to follow those directions. They're not going to do what we ask. There's a lot of crying or screaming. Sensory is increased, so they may need to run more, they may need to jump more, they may like to crash their body more. What we call fight, flight, or freeze. We often hear fight or flight a lot, and freeze is where they just don't know what to do. So it sometimes looks like they're zoning out or not paying attention or just not doing anything because they're so stuck, they don't know what to do. They eat poorly or lose weight. A lot of times that may mean they either snack a lot or they don't snack enough. They don't like to sit down for meals. A lot of times in preschool children, we'll see them having nightmares or they wake up a lot throughout the night. And at the elementary age, it gets a little bit different. We see a lot more anxious and fearful behavior. And this may be around things that they've already done. So an experience they already have. They might love music one day and not want to go the next day. There's a lot of guilt or shame that they feel. And while we may not make sense of it, to them, that's how they feel. And so they'll share that. They're like, no, I don't want to. Like, I'm afraid, or I did this last time and everybody's judging me. Again, that defiance that can be misinterpreted as being just being defiant. It looks like defiance, but it is not defiance. It's a way of protecting themselves. Again, we see that increased sensory, and as they grow, that changes. So some kids still need to run and jump. Some still need to crash. Some might like to have squeezes and other sensory input throughout their day. So again, it does change, but it can increase at the elementary level. We still see that fight, flight, or freeze. They have a really hard time concentrating. And this we see a lot at the elementary level where, we want them to focus, get in those basic skills, but they really have a hard time attending to long tasks. Even a simple task at their table where they just maybe have to like build numbers with cubes is sometimes just too overwhelming and too hard. We continue to see that difficulty with sleeping, and a real fear of failure starts to come in at this level where kids are afraid to take that risk or that chance, whether it be socially, emotionally, or academically. They just are afraid to put themselves out there. The middle and high school level students and children, it's a little bit different. Again, we see more depressed or wanting to be alone. They're not sure how to handle those transitions through puberty and towards adulthood, and they don't really know how to use skills or strategy to be successful, so that you may see more of that being depressed, expressing depression, or just wanting to be alone. Again, there's that defiance, and that is at every grade level. And that has a lot to do with they're protecting themselves. So they're not purposely trying to ignore you or say no to things. They're just not sure about things. So they're going to look like they're being defiant. Sensory continues at this level. Again, it looks different again with how their body is changing, how much they've grown. I mean, it's really tricky if you go from being a short child to being a really tall child by the time you hit high school. So sensory does increase and it does change. We will always see fight, flight, or freeze. Those are all things we will see at every grade level. At this grade level, at these grade levels, we start to see a possible development of eating disorders or self-harming behaviors. They begin abusing alcohol or drugs if they have access to those materials. And then we sometimes see risky sexual behavior, and they don't really have that gauge or that way to say, maybe this isn't a great idea. Again, a lot of it has to do with that attachment and trying to connect to humans. They just don't have those skills or strategies in order to do so because of the trauma. And these are some of our strengths that, these are the strengths that our kids have already within them and that what we want to build on with them. Cheryl, are you muted?
Thank you. Our kids are leaders. They're compassionate. They're able to read people in a room. They're very energetic. They can be independent. They're multitask. They're able to divide their attention, and they're guardians of justice.
In addition to those strengths, our children are very calm under pressure. They are your calm, cool cats when things seem really challenging because they've learned those tools. They're very creative. They are artists. They are problem solvers. They can think through things that sometimes I am not even sure what angle they came in at, but they're great. They are protectors. They will look out for the underdogs in their classrooms and in their settings, and in their community, and they will try to protect them. They are also super careful. They will not put themselves out there. They will be cautious, but they're so observant in doing so. They probably know more about situations than we do because they're very careful. They always want to do well. That's a huge strength. They want to please, they want to do well, and they are persistent. They will never give up, even when things pile up against them.
All right, so one of the strategies that we utilize in my program, it actually comes from the Nonviolent Crisis Intervention program that we use at BOCES, at TST BOCES. It's called rational detachment. So it's that idea of reorganizing the need to remain professional or to remain calm in the family setting and manage your own behavior in order to impact in a positive way whatever your child is experiencing. One of the quick things that when I'm training in this, I walk around and I give everyone literally a Q-tip as kind of a reminder to put on their board or put on their desk or whatever. And it Q-tip, quit taking it personal. Because a lot of times our students, when they're having these big emotions or these big feelings or acting out in a certain way or expressing something that we don't understand, it isn't about us. It's about something going on internally with them. And the best thing that we can do is take a deep breath, think about what we want to say before we say it. And if you don't have the words, I've been in that situation and had to tell students, this is really a lot, and I'm sorry, I don't know what to say to you, but I'm here with you. And just letting them know that they're safe and reminding them that, you know, you're there with them and you're going to be with them and you're not going to just leave them high and dry. An escalated adult cannot de-escalate an escalated child. So in order to get through whatever the situation is, this idea of rational detachment, I call it healthy disassociation. Like you pull yourself right out of whatever's going on. But then you circle back and come like, that was really hard. And this is how it felt for me later with another adult in a place that's safe. But it really helps in that moment to not let those feelings kind of build up and overwhelm you while you're trying to support and co-regulate the child that's in front of you really in struggle. So Q-tip is one of the biggest things I train, and I bring it back up throughout the year with staff. Just because even like working in an alternative high school setting, it is really easy when they come at you with whatever nonsense they're having that day. And they're really struggling internally, and they come at you because you're the next one to, you know, stop them or wouldn't let them do the thing that they thought they needed to do. But it's not about us. It's about what's going on with them. And if we just give them that time to for them to take a deep breath and to model co-regulation, it pays off dividends in the end. All right. So for rational detachment, I already kind of talked about this. Like, you ask for help. If you're in a situation, once you get through it, if you're like, man, I did not have the tools for that, think about what happened and who do you know that might be able to support you next time. Ask for help. It is not, you are never too far up the food chain or too deep into it to ask for help. I ask for help on a daily basis. Sometimes I go straight to the kids, quite honestly. And even as young as when I taught the last 5 years I taught, I was a self-contained special ed for K1. And I would go back when my kids were at baseline and ask them, hey, when you're really stuck, do you know what might help you? And sometimes they're like a lollipop or an ice cream or something like that. And they're like, okay, well, we can get there. But like in school, what can I do? Could I get you some Play-Doh? Could we put you, you know, in a quiet corner with some stuffies? What might help? And just running through all the different options with them. They're really good at telling you what they need in the moment. And a lot of times as adults, we think we know best. And really, if you go straight to the source, that's probably one of the most effective ways to get to what the kids might need. Another is observing and watching, not only watching your students and watching your children, see what they like and what they don't like. Can you redirect them before whatever behavior is starting to happen gets too big? Are you able to say, hey, where's that stuffy I saw you playing with earlier? Where's that car or that Barbie or whatever it is? Can you go grab that and show it to me? I thought I saw something on it and I just want to make sure it's okay. Just enough to redirect and and short circuit whatever might be happening in their brain that might be causing them to end up in a trigger spiral. I also taught grounding techniques. This works for adults too. So if you're having a hard time doing the rational detachment, you can model while doing it simultaneously. They'll never even know. But grounding, and it can be as easy as, all right, everybody stand up. We're going to push down on the floor, just like that person showing you on the slide there. Push down on your chair. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Don't let it fall up. We used to fall up. We used to tell our kids, don't let the desks fall up. And they'd be like, well, they don't fall up. But it works. Anything like that, jumping, pushing against a wall, clapping, anything that helps them find their body in space again is going to help them kind of stay grounded and stay centered. Breathing work is amazing. YouTube has a ton of awesome breath work for kids of all ages, adults. There's some of the breath work that I think is hilarious. I love Elmo's belly breath from Go Noodle. That is like my jam, and it works. You just start singing it and it makes you laugh and it makes you smile, and then you're on your way. Breath work is huge though. And again, one of those things people think it takes time. This whole process takes time. And if you skip the steps, it takes even longer to come out the other side. You have to go slow to go fast to build growth with our students, especially our students that have any type of trauma or experience in their past that has not been a positive one. So, and then going back to that, think about what you want to say, script it if you need to, even with younger kids. I know I do a lot of scripting when I'm speaking with adults just to make sure that all of the points are lined up, but do that same thing with kids. And it's okay, we're going to make mistakes, but kind of have an idea and some bullet points about what you might want to talk about, because we're just like them and our emotions take over sometimes. So having those bullet points about what you want to say is going to help you. That was a really long tangent, sorry.
And more on that communication, this, I would say that as a special education teacher over the years, this has been one of the most crucial skills that I have had to develop in order to do what Kristin was talking about, that co-regulation, communicating through those really stressful and those moments of distress. But it takes a lot of time, and you must think very rapidly to have your communication help co-regulate in that situation. So a lot of it, there's that verbal communication, what you're going to say in that moment. So really some kids, and they may be high school students, but if they have trauma, once that trauma response is triggered, they cannot take in that information that you're trying to give them. So giving them all of the reasons that they shouldn't be doing a behavior or an action at that moment is not going to go in. Again, you have to co-regulate first, and then you really want to get down to the most important. Don't give them those long essays. Bullet points are great to be like, it is not okay to hit. It is okay to be mad. And giving them that way that they hear you verbalize ways that they can verbalize their own skills. So really thinking through what you're going to say. Then there's the how you say it. There is a big response to the difference in our tone of voice, our volume of our voice, and how fast we talk. Sometimes, and right now, probably tonight, you'll hear us talk fast at times, and you'll hear us talk slow. And so again, when they're in that stuck moment, they can't hear us. They can't, it's not that they're ignoring us. They literally can't take in our information. So you really want to keep your voice calm. I have had students in which I just start whispering with, because then they get really close to you and they're like, wait, what? So I keep it really low. I make sure my voice is low. So that doesn't mean like I'm doing just a whisper. I'm making my voice resonate low. So it's not loud, that high pitch, like I'm excited with you. I'm bringing it down with the way my voice sounds. I'm speaking a little slower. I've had students say to me, why are you talking like that? I'm like, just so that we're all on the same page. And it's okay to take it nice and slow with them. Body language is such a huge form of communication. The way you're looking, the way your face is perceived. And again, these individuals with trauma and neurodiverse situations do not take in our facial features really well. They do not take in our social expressions or our gestures. So if we're communicating a happy thought and our face is very neutral, that's very confusing. If we're resonating a very stern face because they might have just hit their sibling or their cousin, because they're dysregulated or they're having one of those stressful moments due to their level of trauma, they're going to register that your face is really mad and they might know how to process that. So really keeping your face neutral, really being able to like give them that eye contact if they're comfortable. Some kids do not like to be looked at, especially when they're working through their trauma moments. This is not a time we say to our students, please look at me in the face. You don't need, you can communicate without perfect eye contact. A lot of times I just want their body kind of listening to me. So I don't want them across the room. I want to be close to them. Some children don't like to be touched during these moments or when they're having those responses. So really being respectful of that. The way your posture is. So we talk about those big bodies. So we are up high and we're in front of them, that's a very aggressive movement. So if I'm having a conversation with someone, I am down on their level. If it's a individual who happens to be taller than me, which is not uncommon for me, I'll be like, hey, let's sit in a chair together. So at least, we're having that interface more on the same level. I'm giving them enough space. I'm not encroaching on where they are in their space and time, but I'm letting them know with the way my body is, I want to hear you and I want to help you. But just being cognizant that my body can be aggressive, even when it's not my intention. So really practicing those forms of communication. And it takes a while. And everybody has gotten it wrong at least once, if not multiple times, because it is very tricky. To continue with that communication and the considerations, more so in the school setting, sometimes within the home setting, but in the school setting, we really got to take into account the culture of the student we're working with or the family they're a part of, and how they might speak at home, what kind of language they might use at home, being respectful of the way they may identify themselves, their own gender identity, which is more of a high school, middle school, high school kind of level. You don't really see it in the elementary school. Their age, I'm not going to talk the same way to a high schooler the way I will a preschooler. I'm going to use very different language. I'm going to use very different words. You take into consideration their cognitive functioning. What is that developmental level of theirs? So they may be a high school student, but they may be at a developmental level of a 6-year-old. And so again, you're going to take into that cognitive functioning, that level in which you need to communicate on. And again, back to the verbal skills, think about how they are able to communicate things. Sometimes they may say things to us in ways that we're like, wait, what? And we have to think through, oh, this is what they're trying to say, but they don't have the language to say it. Or this is what they are saying. They may not be using the most appropriate language, but they're expressing themselves and they're trying to do so clearly. So just considerations for communication as you help to co-regulate and de-escalate those really tricky situations. Kristin, you're muted.
Thank you. I don't know why I think in my head it's just going to unmute on its own. Another aspect that we think about when we're working with any individual with trauma, is those idea of precipitating factors, those things that impact behavior, either that we know or we don't know. So some known precipitating factors could be things like, have they had breakfast yet? Have they had lunch? Have they had dinner? Did they sleep? Are they a student that takes meds, and did they take their meds? Did they get into a fight? Was the bus too loud? Was the bus too hot? Did they miss the bus? Things like that that might be impacting or influencing their perception of the world in that moment. The trickier side is the unknown pieces, especially for our students that may have some type of neurodiversity going on, because they might not be able to let us know how they're feeling, if they're tired, if they didn't take their medicine, if they're hungry, if there's something internally going on. Is there a chemical imbalance that they need to go have a blood draw or have their doctor talk to them? Any past traumas that we don't know about, that sometimes they don't know about, or they can't put words to because it's been locked away in their brain. Did they not get enough sleep? Did they, get a bad grade, or they didn't get a sticker in one class and everybody else got a sticker and they don't know why? Any of those kind of influences that we as adults might know or not know are going to directly impact how your student or child perceives the world around them. And just keeping those precipitating factors in mind, those influences, is going to help you immensely. Kind of going along with that is the idea of this iceberg. You know about this much, we know about this much of the things that many of our children and students have experienced or been through in their life. That piece at the top is kind of like what the outer world sees. Those are the behaviors, the actions, the words that they're saying. And sometimes they're not great. Sometimes they really don't feel good. And it goes back to that idea of Q-tip, like, don't take it personal. But you're only seeing this much. It might feel like it's this much, but you're really only seeing this much. And all of that underneath the water stuff, those are the feelings and opinions and thoughts and beliefs and values and things that maybe the outside world is bringing into them, that even they might not understand yet, but they know they're being judged based on whatever they're expressing from that little bit at the top. So if they are a student that has really big outbursts because things are too loud, and then they get really loud because they can't handle it and they don't know how to tell us that, they then often, students or children will feel bad or like they're a bad kid because they got really big and loud, even though the big and loud is what hurt them. And it goes back to that idea that Heather was talking about helping them co-regulate, helping give them words for what that is and asking for the things that they need. But really trying to understand that we don't maybe know everything going on beneath the surface. Like the duck on the pond metaphor, on the top he looks cool as a cucumber, but underneath those little feet are just going like crazy trying to keep him above water. And that's very much what many of our children and our students are experiencing, especially if they have neurodiversity in their lives as well as any type of trauma in their background. So they got a lot going on in those little bodies, big bodies.
So these are some of the ways that we have just found in each of our different locations, what we can do to help work through that trauma, especially with our neurodiverse individuals.
Yeah, so and I know there's like crossover because it's for us the communication and the building trust amongst the school setting and the home setting. So some of the things that Kristin was talking about earlier about understanding if the child has eaten or hasn't slept well, or if there's something coming up or things. So as you know, the teachers or the administrators are working with the family, it's really important to have that communication go both ways. So like something we have said like at meetings with teachers and stuff is like if something's off or our kids doesn't seem just right, let us know, because that way maybe we can do some detective work and help work together to figure out what's coming up. I will give you an example of that. One of the children in our home, there was a time a couple of years ago where he just was totally off. And there was a conversation actually that went on with Heather and Renee, because I said, there's something weird, something's off. So there was some detective work that went on. And then because of that communication, Renee and Heather were able to work together and support our child really, really well in this school. And now that's just become part of his ability to function well in school. And I think that also comes with building trust too. It's understanding that it's a communication back and forth, and building the trust with the adults in regards to supporting our kids is really important.
As far as from, am I not muted? No, I'm not muted. As far as from an administrative standpoint, it's kind of bringing all of these pieces together, making sure we're communicating and being consistent and trusting, having observations, but also that we're educating from my end. I'm educating my staff and how best to work with and effectively strategize with families as well as with the students. Like I said, I started with kindergartners. I now work with, 15 through 21-year-olds. And really having them be a part of understanding what's going on with them, helping them talk about what's going on with their feelings and co-regulation. And just like tonight, like I'm happy to sit down anytime with a family and problem solve around their kiddo if they're willing to. And that goes with that modeling tools and skills. Any information that I get that's updated, I try to share with families as well, especially if it has to do with something specific for their child. And many times if we sit in a training or a professional development, there's a kiddo or two that pop in and you're like, oh, this will be really great for them. So I make sure that we share that information, or I share it with my teachers so that they can share it with the families. And it just continues that, two-way communication, because we're only stronger when we work together as a team, and that from the top all the way through the team, I cannot stress enough the importance of open communication and trust, and making sure, like Cheryl said, that even if you're noticing the smallest difference in a kiddo, letting the family know right off the bat, because they might be like, oh, I forgot, he didn't have his favorite blue cup this morning. He had a green cup, and that could set him off for the day. That's a whole thing, even with high schoolers. So making sure that, okay, you didn't get the blue cup at home, I'm going to bring in a blue cup. We're going to have a backup blue cup, and we can totally set those things up. And then maybe circumvent something, from turning into a whole day thing. But little things that might get missed, for me, you cannot over communicate enough, especially with our kiddos that have any type of background, which every kiddo does. I've never met one student that doesn't have something to share from their past. And no thing is too big, no thing is too small. It just is what it is. So let's figure out how to work with them and with each other and help them be successful.
And in the classroom setting, a lot of times that observation is the key. And it goes with just observing the smallest of things. For example, I currently have a student who, when they start to like shake their pencil in a certain way, I know that means that something is really challenging. And it's my job then to step in and be like, hey, let's figure this out. And she doesn't always like that because she's like, how do you know? And we always joke. I'm like, Miss Murphy knows everything. It's fine. It's good. But really having those observations, and like Cheryl said, for the child in her home, it really connected with that communication. It maybe went on for like 3 days. I'm like, something is really off here. It doesn't feel like our normal days. This doesn't feel like what happens after a vacation, because you learn to read those signs. So I called Cheryl. I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but this is what I'm seeing, which led, of course, to the great conversation with Renee and built on my skill level, because I don't know everything. So it helped to connect paths for me to find more information, for me then to figure out what I needed to do to co-regulate that student, to help provide the sensory that he needed to get through the day. So that the observation was key in that. And then in classrooms, you really want to see that consistency. So it doesn't mean I'm not going to try new strategies or new avenues with my students. It means that once I find one that's pretty successful, I'm going to keep using that. I'm going to keep my routine and my responses the same. I currently have a 4th grader and a 1st grader that I work with who both have a lot of trauma in their background. And so they both ended up being near me at the same time. And one of them was like, I know what you're going to say to that. The 1st grader says to me, I know what you're going to say to that. And I said, okay, well, what am I going to say? So she responds that I can be mad. It's okay to be mad. I may not hit other kids. And I said, you're right. My 4th grader then goes, she's never going to change what she says to you, especially when it has to do with hitting. So that consistency, they expect that. They expect me to say these things and do these things. That looks like co-regulation for some of them, but it is also giving them that consistency that they need to know that I am safe, I am routine, I'm going to help them the same way, and there is nothing that they can do that will change how much I will help them. But it is all connected. The classroom, the administration, and the home all have to be connected in order for these situations to become successful and maintain those levels of success. Kristin and Cheryl, anything else to add in there before I?
Beautiful. Nice job.
Well done, team. Well done.
Go team. All right. And with that, some of the specific strategies that we wanted to share with you, and from my standpoint as both from the teacher and admin side, one of the best things that we can do as the adults, if we are not able to get ourselves in that place of rational detachment, as I mentioned earlier, where we can't stop taking it personally or we are elevating the situation, we need to be able to recognize that in ourselves, and tap out. And if that is something that's available, I know at home that might look a little different. That at home can look like, all right, you know what? We both need a timeout. I'm going to set the timer for however many minutes. You're going to go sit over there and either read some books, draw, watch something on your iPad, play a game, do what you need to do. I'm going to go sit in another room. And when the timer's done, we're going to try and have a conversation again, or we're going to try and do this again. That is not failing. That is completely appropriate and excellent modeling. And I would be like patting everybody on the back if they did this. At school, this looks like, if there's multiple adults, we have a phrase at BOCES, because it's really hard for some of our staff to be tapped out. As someone who hates being tapped out, because I'm like, no, we're going to do this. We use like, hey, go wash your face. Just this way, it's not anything signaling to the child like, oh, they won or anything like that. It's, hey, you're looking a little warm, go wash your face. And they know they don't fight. They're like, oh, okay, cool, thank you. They tap out, someone immediately taps in and picks up. Sometimes the fresh face just helps. Sometimes it is just the change of tone or change of human that is helpful. But if you're able to tap out with another adult that's safe and reliable with that kiddo, great. If not, it's completely acceptable to tap out with a device sometimes, no joke. It's better to go at it again when you're regulated and you can have a more rational conversation. With that same idea, going back to the co-regulation, you need to know yourself as well. I would say probably better sometimes going into these situations, because if you are not able to regulate yourself, you are not going to be able to regulate a dysregulated human. Big human, small human, does not matter. A lot of times I will go into a meeting, and I'm one of those people that I joke about, that's like my superpower. You can feel the energy in the room. You can tell who's dysregulated and who's not within about 30 seconds of being in that room. And the goal for that is to continuously be the calming presence, even if on the inside I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. On the outside, it has to be, we're okay, we're good, we got this. And really bringing the tone and the energy down so the ping pong balls aren't going all over the place, and just settle them a little bit, and then go into whatever you need to do. Even if that's just sitting and rocking, or having some time tossing a ball against a wall, coloring, outside, walking, super grounding technique, which also goes right into sensory, which is a little bit trickier for some of our kids, especially if they're students with any type of neurodiversity or developmental delay, or anything in that area. They might not know that they need to carry a heavy backpack, or that they need to do some big heavy work or some wall push-ups. Or on the other side, they might not know that it's really calming for you to just rub your hand up and down their arm, or brush their hair. I had a little girl that once we figured out, oh my goodness, you brush her hair and put it up in a high pony, and she is the best human in the planet. She does no wrong. It's like a completely different personality comes out. It's amazing. But she just needs that hair brushing. And once we got her to start asking for that, she would just come up with the hairbrush and a scrunchie and be like, and hand it to you. And that was kind of your cue non-verbally that she was ready for regulation. But any of those things are coming back. It all ties together with observation, communication. We found this works at home, maybe it'll work at school. We found this works at school, maybe it'll work at home. And really bringing it all together to try and figure out the puzzle that makes up our tiny humans.
And just to piggyback on sensory real quick, children will let us know what they need once they know what it is. So sometimes you do have to teach the sensory strategies, such as that hair brushing, that arm rubbing. We sometimes do joint compressions, we'll push joints together. They don't know how to ask for those things. So you might need to teach some of those things, and then teach them like to say arm rubs, squeeze, brush, and things of those nature. So once you teach it, they are more apt to be able to say, yeah, that's what I want. I really want that. So teaching those skills when they're calm is key. Again, like we talked about earlier, you cannot communicate what you want to happen in a situation when they are escalated. They are not listening because they cannot hear you. That part of their brain that takes in information and does something with it is not working. And so you really have to wait till they're calm. So you co-regulate with them. You model what it means to be calm. You provide the sensory. You take a little bit of a break if you need to. And then when they're calm, you start talking through those strategies. Hey, I noticed this. Tell me what was happening there. They may tell you something that your brain goes, what? No way. You can't do that. This is their story. This is their perspective. And to them, it's very real. So once they're calm, you might need to say, I hear what you're saying. This is what you could do instead. Or I hear what you're saying. How about we go take a sensory break together? And teaching them those skills to be more successful when they're escalated due to their history of trauma. Kristin has talked about this a lot, is knowing your own triggers. What's going to trigger you? Being able to regulate. It is tricky. There are days where we are tired. There are days where we wanted to do all of these things and we got nothing done. And so we're just frustrated with the world. These are all natural feelings. If anybody's happy all the time, I mean, I'd like to meet them because it's impossible. We are humans. We have these feelings, but knowing what is going to trigger you and set you off, or what's going to really upset you. So if you have a kid who's really having, a traumatic response to a situation and they're really screaming and carrying on and crying, and after a certain point you just can't handle it anymore, that's one of your triggers. If you have a kid who does every sort of behavior to try to get you to go away, they're not really asking you to go away. They just don't know what to say. So they're going to use behaviors because they want to prove that you're going to leave like everybody else has left. And so understanding that, I will tell you, one of my triggers is I don't really appreciate being spit on. It is not, that takes a lot of regulation on my behalf when I'm spit on. It happens. it is communication. Their behavior is communicating to me that they are not happy with me. I understand they're communicating with me. It's just not my favorite thing in the world when it happens, but they're letting me know something. So when I get spit on, I really have to know that that's a trigger for me. I need to take my internal deep breaths. I need to count to 10 internally in my head and just be able to re-regulate that situation because I'm completely grossed out and offended by that. But it's my trigger. I know that. Emergency and evacuation plans. Those are much more of a school strategy, but they can be used in the home in the sense like knowing when things get really hard, who are your resources to reach out to? I'm going to be honest, Cheryl's a great resource. Renee is a great resource. These are resources to reach out to from your home. In school, we reach out to our school team, our administrators, our school mental health team, but knowing who you can reach out to, having that emergency kind of plan in your brain when things start to go really tricky, which happens sometimes. In school, we call those emergency evacuation plans. We put those in place when a kid is very dysregulated, very having a very traumatic response moment to whatever stimuli it was that, triggered that for them. Sometimes we have to find a way to have the rest of the class leave the classroom or leave a space to let that kid start to co-regulate and get de-escalated in a place where it all began. Sometimes we have kids leave that space because it's just not safe for them or for others. So we do have those plans at school. They may look very different at home. I'm sure, Cheryl, you could talk a little bit about what that may look like when things have gotten really challenging at home and what to do for that emergency evacuation kind of situation at home.
So it's individualized, right? And it depends on your kid. And I think emergency evacuation plans are put into place when we're regulated ourselves as parents or as adults in the home, right? So those are knowing your child and knowing what's important and things like that. So that's individualized, but it's always something to keep in the back of your head and to have a plan.
Kristin, was there anything else we wanted to add for that page?
No, I think you did a great job. We summed it up very nicely.
Perfect. Moving on. Oh, skipped a page. Skipped a. Uh-oh. The slide is missing.
It's okay. It's our superhero slide.
Our superhero slide is missing.
That's all right.
So we'll just say it. So all of our kids who are in these situations are in your homes, either through foster care, adoption, or your own kids. They are all superheroes. Okay, I'm going to share our last slide, just so everybody can see it.
Resources one.
And there you go, Cheryl.
Yeah, so these are some resources that we used in preparing for tonight. And just to know that the slides will be available so you don't have to memorize these.